Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Your Intention Matters, the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us on this one. My name, of course, is still Paul Madad, and today I have Barth Montarello. He is Vice President, Global Business Management, coming to us from Smiley Company. I love the name, Barth. Smiley
Hi.
Company in the UK. How are things, man?
Very well. Hi, nice to meet you, Paul, and thanks very much for the invitation. Much appreciated.
I appreciate you accepting. I'm looking forward to you sharing your story. I just said you're located in the UK, but I detect a Parisian French accent, so I can't wait to hear what you're up to. But before we get into it, do me a favor, Bart. Do me a favor. Say hi to everybody. Provide a quick intro, and then we'll jump into your journey.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Paul. So my name is Barth. I'm the global vice president on management for the Smiley company over the last 10 years. I'm actually from the French Caribbean. I'm French myself. And I've been in London for over 17 years now. I met a beautiful British lady, and I've got two beautiful daughters at home. So that's a bit my background. And with regard to Smiley, I would say I'm one of their biggest ambassadors, working for the brand in and out.
I love it. I love it. And so I appreciate you being here. And so, Bart, we were talking before I hit record regarding, really what the purpose of the podcast is. And it's called Your Intention Matters. And it's really built on my foundation, and nothing is really given to any of us. And most of us in the world of sales and sales leadership, I never thought we'd even get into anything like that at all. And yet here we are, global business management and managing directors and sales directors. And yet none of us really thought we'd be doing it. And with that said, I look forward to you sharing your story. You ready to go?
Yes, I am. Let's go.
All right, here we go. So let's go back in time on this one. Let's go back 20 years now almost. ISG, Institut Supérieur de Gestion. Am I saying that right?
Pretty much.
All right. Listen, I live in Canada. We're a bilingual country, but I don't pretend to speak French at all. But I see here you went to school in Paris. You touched on the fact that you were from the French Caribbean. And so talk to me about, how did you get to Paris?
So, well, I was born and raised in a French Caribbean island called Guadeloupe, which is very a little island in the middle of nowhere. So I was extremely lucky and blessed to be born on that island. And I spent the first 18 years of my life, enjoying the Caribbean, I would say, and all the beauty behind. But when you get older, obviously, because of the size of this island and the opportunities which bring this island couldn't sometimes be up to my expectations. So I took the decision back in 2001, precisely, to leave my island and to continue my studies in Paris. And that's what I did, and left my island. It was quite hard, because when you're an island boy, you living in Paris, it's black and white, so it's a completely different setup, a different way of doing things, different mentality, different type of people, so it was a brand new world for me, on the top of being in a business school. But I spent 4 years in Paris. I got my diploma, and following this diploma, basically, I was, like everyone else, looking for a job. Basically all the jobs that I really wanted to apply for, they were basically asking for fluent English, like most of the companies nowadays. Unfortunately, English has never been my strength. When I was at school, I always had to put a cross on English, not really understanding why English was an important thing in life. That's perhaps a French thing, I don't know. But I never really be into such language, and I understand my mistake, obviously, over the years. But bottom line is, I decided to leave Paris just for 6 months. So I told my friends and the people around me that I will be studying in Paris. I will be studying in London, for a few months, and start to work over there and trying to improve my English, like many French people do on a yearly basis. However, I decided not to come back in Paris, and it's been now 17 years. In the meantime, I met my wife. Obviously, it does help you to stay in a country. Yeah. And the rest is history. And it's been 17 years now in London.
So, Bar, let me ask you this: the transition from the French Caribbean to Paris, to your point, significant lifestyle change, volume of people, access to whatever. But I'm curious about this: the outside of the transition from a small island to a massive metropolis like Paris, was the French language the same? I've been told that there's different dialects, and like Italy has like half a dozen, and Spanish is Mexico's different from Spain. And say, like, was that a challenge for you as well, or was it a pretty seamless language transition for you?
Well, no, that's a good question. Well, in Guadeloupe, actually, my first language was Creole, as we call it.
Okay.
It's basically a mix of French and perhaps a bit of Spanish and different influences, which is a very specific language. So that was my first language. However, funny enough, when I was very, very young and when my mom couldn't really understand what I was talking about, she decided to actually put me in a private school from an early age, so I could actually learn French properly, which back in 1984, when I started school, it wasn't really the case, especially in a small island where we didn't have much out there. Life was way more easy than compared to Paris or France back in the days. So yeah, I mean, Guadeloupe, the island itself, belongs to the French territory. So the official language is French. The official money is euro. So we do have pretty much the same setup as what you get in France. The only difference is you are 6,000 miles away from France, and a completely different setup. So it didn't bother me at all. I think not the language itself, because I always been very adaptable myself. Whatever I do, I know how to adapt myself on the situation, no matter what. And I think that this really helped me to do that transition between that small island, where I was surfing pretty much every day, and then arriving in Paris, where life is very different. So I managed to adapt myself over the years. And I really enjoy my time in Paris. I mean, especially when you're studying, you have all these parties and, enjoyment when you're young. And that was something quite new for me because I never really experienced this, back in Guadeloupe, where life, as mentioned, is very, very different in every aspect. So yeah, I enjoy Paris very much. But at the end of the day, Paris is a very specific city, it's a very special city. And I would say it's not for everyone. So yeah.
So, Bart, I'm curious about this. Your decision to go to Paris, you study at ISG, and I know that you took business and management and accounting, and you had a few things that were going on. When you graduated with your diploma, did you have a vision for what you thought you wanted to do? Or was it like most of us, all right, now I got to figure it out?
You're absolutely right. To be honest with you, I was a bit lost when I got this diploma, which was obviously my main target coming to Paris. And with this diploma in my pocket, I was a bit like looking at myself and figuring out what I really wanted, to do and to achieve, then what I'm passionate about, what I really want to achieve in my life. So I started a few jobs here and there. Actually, one of my first job was at Universal Music, and I was working for one of their music label called Polydor, and I had like an internship for like over a year out there. And I'm a big fan of music, and I thought that this potentially could be an interesting avenue for me. And fortunately, it wasn't. So I decided to look again at what I wanted to achieve, and basically it comes to that English, where all the jobs that I was looking at, which I could think that was something quite interesting for me. It was an English bilingual language that they were asking for, which wasn't my case at all. I couldn't speak a word of English back in 2001, literally. So I thought that I think it's important for me to step back and instead of just rush and just find a job like most of us, I decided to come in London, which was the closest place in Europe where I could learn English. It's a 2 hours train journey from Paris, as many of us know. And I thought that just spending 6 months in London will help me first to learn the language to start with and potentially to find a job. But I never, ever for a second, imagine that I will remain in London. That was not at all my target. I really, really wanted to come back in Paris. I missed my mates, and I missed the Parisian life, because despite the fact it's only 2 hours difference, life between London and Paris is completely different, from A to Z. So it was for me at the beginning, because I came in London on my own with my two luggages, like, just trying something new. And the first thing I've done is I went back to school. I did these evening classes over 2 years to actually learn English. That was the only way for me to actually learn English, because, as we all know, in London there is a lot of French people. Actually, we said that London is the 8th or 9th biggest French city, believe it or not. So we do have a lot of French people in this country, especially in London. And the last thing I wanted to do is to end up talking French, being in London. That's I felt really frustrated about it. But that I ended up doing, because, believe it or not, one of my first experience was working for the French embassy in 2007. I got this job like in a very random way. And I decided to pursue, in a public administration and working for the French embassy for over 2 years. Which wasn't really in my plan. But as you said, it was basically, I was just looking at the opportunities, and I was very much looking forward to grow in this country. I met my wife over the years, back in the days. She became my wife in 2019, but I met her in 2006. So obviously it did help me to stay a bit longer in London, instead of just coming back to France. And decided never to come back in France and to do my life here in the UK.
Bart, I'm it's where you touched on one thing. You said you went from Creole to French, which is there's a bit of a connection there between the languages. So it's not like you're starting from ground zero and from the beginning. But when you realize that English was almost a must for you based on what you were seeing in the market, do you recall frustration at the time? Do you recall a sense of nervousness? Well, what if I don't pick up this language? What is it going to mean for my career? Did you have any fears or frustration about, you finish your schooling, you're ready to get out there, and now all of a sudden you have to start over and learn this new language, which English is not the easiest of languages to learn. There's a lot of all kinds of nuances to the language.
Well, actually, I would say that compared to French, Paul, English is perhaps one of the easiest language to learn. And I understood that. Right. I understood that, unfortunately, a bit too late. I should have been a good student, a good English student, which, again, as mentioned, never really, fit my expectation. And I always wanted to, I never understood, why learning a second language. What's the point? I mean, if you go to France, French people don't speak much English. And again, yes, when I arrived, it was actually very hard, especially where I'm coming from, from this Caribbean life, to moving to Paris and having to study on my own, and discovering a new country, and then deciding to leave Paris to start again, and with a diploma in hand, and end up being back to school at evenings and being a student again, So for your own sake, that was something hard for me to go ahead with. But I really pushed myself, because the thing is, in life, I always had the options back in the days, not to learn English and to make my life a bit more easy. But when you end up not having any more options, then you don't have any other ways to actually learn English. And I was in London on my own, and I was surrounded by only foreigners people. And that was the only way. If I wanted to express myself, if I wanted to grow, if I wanted to, to be proud of what I wanted to achieve, I had to learn. As simple as it sounds. So I decided to come back to the school, and I got my diploma after 2 years. And I've got to admit that my wife did help me a lot, because my wife being English, of course, it does help a lot to learn English a bit quicker than anyone else. So bizarrely enough, after 17 years in the UK, and I'm not saying that I've got a fluent English by any means, but I do feel more comfortable speaking and especially writing in English rather than French. In France, French, the grammar, the vocabulary, it's very scary. It's quite complex, even for French people. So when I understood how easy it was in English, I never came back to the French. So now, basically, even though I'm working for a French company, everything is in English. And I do find it easier to write and speak in English. Bizarrely enough, that's quite ironic, isn't it?
It is. I would not have expected to hear that. It's because, as somebody myself who was born into English, that's the only language that I grew up. I've been told that it's a rather uniquely difficult language to learn because there's a lot of words that sound the same but can mean five different things. So from that perspective,
True.
it's challenging. And so, let's talk about your decision to go to London and to the UK and then ultimately stay there. When you finally realized and you finished your schooling to learn the English language, what was your first sales professional job and where was that?
So actually, when I left the French consulate, I was extremely lucky to actually have a very specific job, which was to focus on the high French profile, in terms of documentation and traveling documents. So all the French football star back in the days from Arsenal, all the high director on finance, being French, I was taking care of those guys. So I had this opportunity to actually, introduce the fact that I was looking for a job at some point. I wanted to leave that public atmosphere and go back to private. And also because I wanted to continue improving my English and just move out from this French environment that I was in for over 2 years. And I was starting to be a bit frustrated about it. So what the reason being in London to work for a French company, right? It doesn't make so much sense. So I was meeting many high-end profile. And basically I was, at the end of the interview, I was just mentioning that I was looking for a job. And my first job in sales was at Marvel. Marvel from the DC Comics, Marvel back in the days before they got acquired by Disney. So I was working for the UK office based in central London, and I was working as a PA for one of the big director who was a French lady back in the days, and that's basically how I entered the licensing industry, which was a brand new industry to me. I never really knew about this industry, and I thought, you know what? Why not giving a try? I mean, it's Marvel. At the end of the day, it's like the Hulk and the Spider-Man and all the superheroes. I was like watching the movie myself, being a fan of those, of those heroes myself back in the days, and still today. So I thought, let me give a try, and that's basically where I did that big jump by going back to the private and working for the first licensing company, which was Marvel. So that's basically was my first move.
Was that a good experience for you? Was it an easy transition? Did you struggle with selling, or what was that like for you?
I did struggle a lot, actually. First, because everything was in English, and my English level wasn't where I am nowadays. So it was a bit tough, mentally wise and physically wise to actually answer the expectation of my bosses. Fortunately for me, I would say, perhaps back in now when I'm looking at it, I think it was something fortunate for me that back in 2009, Marvel has been acquired by Disney. So when we discuss acquisition, that there is many people who will unfortunately get fired, and that's basically what happened to me and to at least 2/3 of the UK office being fired by the US office. The head office based in the US in New York, and basically that's how I came out from Marvel after a year. And then following Marvel, it was 2009 where we were having this big economical crisis, if you remember. Here also in the UK, where it was quite tough for everyone, and just looking for another job. And I wanted to remain in the licensing industry because the licensing industry, it's a very unique and specific industry, which is growing year on year. And we can tell, when it comes to retail landscape, the amount of product you can find from Disney or Hello Kitty or Smiley. And that's basically a new way of selling to the consumer. So after many research, I actually found Smiley and understood that Smiley was actually a French company based in London. My English was way better back in the days, and I thought, what, let me try again. And then eventually I got that position at Smiley, and I started really at the bottom of the ladder. And step by step over the years, I grew in the company. Being a family business, I think potentially helped me a lot. Marvel was the opposite. Marvel was a very corporate environment and potentially not the best things for me to start with on the private level. So when I arrived at Smiley, having a smaller team, having a more easy way on decision, I thought that this was fitting myself in a much better way. So I felt so much better physically and mentally to express myself and to be who I am today.
You know, Bart, when you were laid off by Marvel, and it was the decision out of your control. It happened to me almost 20 years ago, and I remember when I was called into the boardroom and I was handed a check to not come to work the next day and say, "Here, thanks for working here. Here you go." I remember walking back to my car, and it was a terrifying feeling because my first thought was, well, how much money do I have? And which wasn't very much, quite frankly. I didn't even look at the envelope yet, so I didn't know how much they'd given me. But there was all kinds of things going on in my head around, well, what do I do next? And it was about a 4 to 5 month period for me where I was looking for a job. I passed up on a job that I was offered. It just wasn't right for me, and I got turned down for a job I wanted. And it was, but that 5 or 6 months felt like 6 years for me. It was just like, it was endless. And so I'm curious about when that happened to you. Was there a sense of what I experienced, like, now what? Or was it just, okay, this is good, now I can do something else?
I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, on that day I was shocked. I never been treated like this. And as you know, Paul, the American way could be sometimes quite aggressive when it comes to, fired people. It's like you get to that boardroom, and then eventually you have these rules of not going back to your desk, leave everything at your desk, and eventually from the boardroom you just get to the main door and you're out. With your check in hand. It was more like a money transfer rather than a check. But yes, I was completely lost. I was shocked, to understand. I wasn't sure what was happening to me. But as I said, it was a very good thing when I look at it now.
In the end,
in the end, it was actually a very good thing, because clearly it wasn't back in the days, and based on who I was, it wasn't right for me. It wasn't the right fit. So it was a good thing that, this acquisition happened back in 2009. And basically I was naturally been asked to leave the company along with all my colleagues. And then eventually this experience, I think, really helped me to get stronger in my mind, and to understand basically who I was and what I was specifically looking for, in terms of business opportunities. I refused, from that moment onwards, I refused to find a job just for the sake of working. I had such a tough time over that 12 months period at Marvel, in various ways. And despite the fact they're a beautiful company, don't get me wrong, it's beautiful movies, beautiful cartoons, and so on. But as an employee, it wasn't right for me. So it was a good thing that I understood over the next few years, that actually it was good for me to leave this place and start again, and believe in myself and understand what I really wanted to achieve. Stay in the licensing business was something important to me, because it was a brand new industry for me that I learned over a year. And at Marvel, you learn quickly, because there is so much happening that you're learning like on the day, and that's basically what I was doing. And I refused to find a job just for the sake of paying my bills. That wasn't an option for me. Life is too short. I'm passionate about what I do, Paul. I'm passionate about my life. I believe I'm super blessed as a person. I've got 2 beautiful daughters. I've got an amazing wife. I've got hot water. I've got an amazing Wi-Fi connection. Do you know how many people around this world who don't have hot water? So I'm trying to remind myself, about simple, basic things in life, and how to don't take them for granted, and this is part of my mentality of who I am as a person. So I wanted to pursue this industry within the licensing, and at Smiley I actually found my space, because Smiley have got very unique values, on board, and a very simple and unique way of approaching our consumers, approaching our clients, our partners, our traders, our retailers, and so on. And I think having to deal between a French and English, so I could still use my French skills at some degrees, but learn also English at the same time, was for me the perfect formula. And as I said, the rest is history. It's been now over 10 years.
But I was going to say, you said that you found Smiley around 2010.
20,
if my math
20
was correct.
2009, yeah, precisely. Yeah.
2009, and here we are, 2023. You're still there. So have you been with them the entire time?
So pretty much. So basically, what I do, it's I spent 5 years at Smiley until 2013. Then I always had this willingness of having my own business. I mean, you look at all those podcasts, you look at all those success stories, and I wanted somehow to give a try. I wasn't married back in the day. I didn't have kids, and I thought to myself, I said, why don't I just give a shot? Just give a try. Nothing. It doesn't mean that I cannot change my life at later stage. So I completely changed my industry. I decided to launch my own company. I was a trading company. I was manufacturing sportswear clothing, and especially in the mixed martial art field. So everything remaining to kimono, karate, judo, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, boxing in general, mixed martial arts, UFC. I was basically within that field, and I was manufacturing sportswear clothing because back in the day, one of my good mates was in charge of this manufacturing and said, "Barth, why don't you just try this field? It's good money, it's fun, and again, you are in charge of your own business." So I thought, let me give a try. So I built up my own company. Right. I've been doing this for 3.5 years. At the end of the day, I was earning my life. I was doing my job. However, as you may know, Paul, when you are an entrepreneur, cash flow sometimes could be an issue and could be a roller coaster. That's point number one. Point number two is when you're an entrepreneur and when it's your first experience, you normally work 7 days a week, so weekends are becoming a bit complicated. And when you work from home, this naturally can bring some potential sensitivity within your couple, I would say, and personal life.
Yeah.
So after 3 years, I thought to myself, I said, is it again the right field for me? And I left Smiley because I wanted to experience something else, and before it was too late. And I always remain in very good terms with the president and the CEO of the company, who are like father and son. So I came back 3 years later and said to Nicolas, our CEO, who I know really well and working with him on a daily basis, I said, Nicolas, listen, if you are looking for someone, I'm happy to come back to my first love. And basically that's what happened. He said, Barth, of course, always happy to have you back. And the rest is history. And then I started at Smiley again back in 2017. And it's been like nearly 6 years now.
Barth, as you're speaking about your story and the decision to bet on yourself and start up your own company and giving it a shot, you're not married, you're not a father, you're really only responsible for yourself. It takes me back to my decision to do that as well, because I can fully understand what you're saying, where I was working for Xerox Corporation. I had a nice career there, but I wanted to have my own business. And I was single, wasn't married, no kids. It was just myself. And I said, well, why not? Let's give it a shot. And here it's been several years, later. And it was the best decision I ever made. And it sounds like it was an amazing experience for you as well. But I acknowledge what you say. As a business owner, there's so many ups and downs, especially early on with cash flow. Like there's no base salary, there's expenses you don't expect. And so, after 3 years of leaving Smiley, was it humbling to go back to them? Was it the same company you went back to? What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was still looking at the companies on a regular basis through social media, so I was aware, of what was happening out there. As mentioned, I left in very good terms, my board understood why I wanted to try something else, and didn't try to stop me. If that's what you want to do in your life, I'll just go for it. Enjoy yourself. Life is too short for many of us, unfortunately. So, if you think that this is not right, just do whatever you think is right. Just trust your gut. That's basically at this moment in time, that's what I wanted to achieve. So I left in good terms, followed the brands over the years. I was even like having catch up with Nicolas, I'll say, having lunch, occasionally together and just having a few catch up here and there. So when I came back, it was like I never left somehow, even though it was a 3 years gap. And I came back to my routine, I would say, and felt extremely happy and comfortable with the task that basically I was asking to do. And again, knowing the story already in a company, so I didn't have this feel that I was starting from scratch. A few things have changed in the company over the years, of course, starting with the staff, a few new faces on board, but more importantly, the message, the values, and the mission of the company has never changed and will never change. And that's the reason why I was there at the first instance, the first time. And the reason why also I came back, the second time, just because of the value we are spreading around us. And those values are so important to me. And I believe also important for others. And those values are about happiness, Paul. Happiness is, it's something which is very important to me. And that's what Smiley is about.
And so in your current role, how long have you been? So in your most recent tenure with Smiley, it's been 6 years now, did you say?
So I did like 4 years in one go, and then I left and came back, and now it's been 6 years as my second second job, basically.
Okay. And so how long have you been in your current role within Smiley now?
It's been like quite a few years now. So basically my role has evolved quite a bit inside the company. I went through various departments. And again, when you work for a family business, you have to have those entrepreneurial skills. That's very important.
Of course.
When you work for big companies, big corporate companies, we ask you to do one thing in one country, in one space, and that's all you're doing. When you work for a family business, everything is open. And basically, I've been learning in various aspects about how it works on the finance side, how it works on the product development side, how it works on the marketing side, how it works on the approval and so on. So I've been basically, working across every single department in this company, not as a designer, because I'm a very horrible designer. But apart from the design team, I was pretty much across all departments to understand how a business works, because in my opinion, if you want to succeed, in your role, especially when it's sales, you have to understand how the mechanic works. What is the formula, behind? And when you have understood this formula, then basically, things gets easier, in terms of understanding and in terms of pitching. Pitching is something very important in our business. That's what I do on a daily basis. Even though for me, it's not about pitch, it's about telling a story. And that's basically what I consider myself. I'm not here to sell anything to anyone. I'm here to tell you a happy story, and see basically how it resonates in your mind. And if it resonates the right way, then I believe we can collaborate with each other. So, it's a completely different way of selling. And that's what I was mentioning at the early beginning of our conversation, Paul. And that's basically, I don't feel that I'm a salesperson, even though at the end of the day, that's what I do. Don't get me wrong. But the way I introduce the brand and why collaborating with Smiley and the importance of having us on board and how Smiley can leverage your existing business in a very strategic and fun and happy way, then that's basically what I do on a every day of the week.
And Bart, how long have you been married now, and how old are your girls?
So I met my wife in basically 2 months after I arrived in London in a very random way. And basically I spent 13 years with her before popping the question. And I just wanted to make sure, yes, she was the one. And yes, she is the one. So we managed to enjoy ourselves over the years, not having kids, and my wife is an architect working for one of the best practice in London, a very talented woman, and me super happy and proud of being married to her. So we got married in 2019 in France. It was a beautiful weekend with family and friends. It was just amazing. And we had our first girl in 2020. She's now 2 years and 3 months. And we welcome our second daughter in 2022, in August last year. Yeah. So
congratulations.
Two beautiful girls.
So your kids are pretty young. Your kids are pretty young.
They are still very young compared to many of my friends who have started that journey like 10 years ago. For many of them, it wasn't right for me to have kids, 10 years ago. I wanted to enjoy myself. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have this, this special time with my girlfriend. And I wasn't simply ready to have kids. And I don't think she was either. So I think we welcome our daughters a bit later than anyone else. But at the end of the day, we managed to travel the world and to have this very important part of our life together, if that makes sense.
Bart, I think our stories are aligned, but the only difference is the Atlantic Ocean between, because I was 39 and 41 when I had my kids. So
Same for me,
I
exactly.
I
Spot on.
partied in my 20s and had lots of
Yeah,
fun, and then I found the right, wife and my woman, and now she's my wife, and it was amazing. And so, talk to
it's
me
funny.
about the last few years, because here we are in 2023, and the world is, it seems like we're getting back to somewhat 2019 normal. The lockdowns are kind of away. There's still, COVID's out there and it's still impacting stuff. We're working remote and so on. But when you think about 2020, 2021, you're a new dad. How did COVID impact, you with Smiley and your business and your life? Was it bad? Were you
Mm.
shut down? Was it bad for your business? Did you thrive as a result of COVID? And how did you manage, having this newborn when everyone's wearing a mask, you can't go out, like you can't do anything? Like, how did you survive, that 2020, 2021 range?
It that was actually a very I don't know, weird feeling, to be honest, because on one side at home, we are doing nothing basically. Everything was shut down, as we all know, and having
Yeah.
this frustration of having kids, as we call them, like COVID baby. That's basically why I called my first daughter, not being able to actually be staying with my wife at the hospital at this stage, and
That's
fighting.
right.
Yes, and fighting with NHS to let me in, when my wife was actually, having the baby. So it was like a very emotional time from a personal point of view. I lost my grandmother because of COVID, and like many of us, unfortunately. And it was a very frustrated time that actually, I think it was quite brand new for many of us. I mean, we never experienced something like this as a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic. And I think
Yeah.
we all had to adapt in various ways from a personal point of view. So being stuck at home, I don't think it's easy for anyone, especially when you have kids at home from a very early age. Now I understand, and I'm really proud of our teachers, and how patient, those guys are, because having kids at home, it's quite
So
tough,
true.
and manage to make them feel happy, during the day, and entertain them during the day. It's not an easy, it's a full-time job, as we said, So now I
Totally.
understand the teaching model more and more. But bottom line is, while life was obviously complicated from a personal point of view, from a business point of view, it was the absolute opposite. At
Is that
Smiley, we
right?
have basically never ever been that successful, since COVID started. We have increased, in fact, our turnover by 125% from March 2020 to 2022. And I think the main reason why we've been so successful, it's for very simple ones. We're not trying to, to find crazy excuses here, but what happened is basically our values. We are the happiest brand in the world. That's at the end of the day who we are. As a mission, it's to make our world a happier place. That has been our mission for over 50 years. And I think that happiness, it's something which resonates really well in consumer mind. We all try to be happy, you, me, everybody, so it's easy to be happy, especially when it's behind a screen, but it's not that easy to be happy in reality. So
Yeah.
for me, it was more like having, this thought in mind, and this type of values that we share on a daily basis, which were resonating the right way in consumer mind. As I always said, Paul, a happy customer is a customer spending their money. So how can we make them happy again with Smiley? Well, we do have quite a
Right.
few tools in hand in order to achieve this. As I always said, and perhaps just to finish on this note, for me, happiness and a smile is one of the oldest and potentially one of the most powerful currency. However, so many of us don't so much understand that. Why? Because we're too busy. It's about ROI, it's about money, it's about just working harder and harder and harder rather than smarter and smarter. And I think that, if a smile is done in a very sincere way, it can open many, many doors. And that's at the end of the day what we do best at Smiley. We are here to open the right doors and bring that happiness vibes, into that door, and bring a unique storytelling, a bespoke approach, which will resonate in consumer mind. a smile is contagious, and that's what we believe.
Barth, what a great story. I so appreciate you being here. You grew up, raised in the French Caribbean. You go to Paris and you get educated there. You make a decision that you want to become fluent in English to really help propel your career. You make a decision to go to London, thinking it's going to be short term, and yet you haven't left. Along the way, you met your wife. You found Smiley. You were packaged off at Marvel. Had to deal with that. You bet on yourself to start up your own company along the way as well. You come back to Smiley. You get married. You have 2 amazing daughters, and so congrats on all your success up until this point. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Paul, for thinking of me. I much appreciate it.
You're very welcome. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap it up right now. Remember, your intention matters. Why? Because that's the result you'll tend to get. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode. We'll do it again next week. I'll see you then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.